In the great kingdom of Eziyama, Princess Adana was the jewel of her father's court. She was beautiful, graceful, and beloved by all. Her laughter was like the song of a river, and her kindness made even the coldest hearts warm. She lived a sheltered life in the grand palace of her father, King Obieze, who ruled with wisdom. One fateful night, during a council meeting, a message arrived from the neighboring kingdom of Umuoma. It bore a solemn reminder. The time had come to fulfill an ancient oath, a betrothal that had been sworn generations ago to ensure peace between the two lands. Adana, the princess of Eziyama, was to be given in marriage to Prince Dike of Umuoma. Though she had never met him, tales of the prince's valor had traveled far. Some said he was a warrior without equal, a man of few words but great strength. Others whispered stranger things, that he walked in shadows and never truly belonged to the world of men. With a heart heavy with duty, Adana was sent to Umuoma. The journey was long, taking her through dense forests and across winding rivers. As they neared Umuoma, a strange feeling settled in her chest. The air grew colder, the trees darker. It was as if the land itself held secrets. The palace of Umuoma loomed ahead, its towering black walls standing against the twilight. Unlike the warm, golden stone of her father's court, this place felt different, solemn, almost eerie. The torches burned with a deep red glow, casting long shadows that flickered like restless spirits. Inside, the wedding ceremony was swift. Prince Dike, her husband-to-be, stood tall and silent. His sharp features were striking, his dark eyes unreadable. When he took her hand, his fingers were ice cold. That night, as they stood alone in their chambers, Adana turned to him, searching his face for warmth, for a sign of the man she had married. But Dike only lingered in the shadows, his voice low and distant. "Rest, Adana," he said. "You are safe here." Then, without another word, he stepped into the darkness and vanished, leaving her alone in the cold silence of their wedding night. Days turned into weeks, and Princess Adana found herself trapped in a marriage that felt more like a transaction than a union. The grand halls of the Umuoma Palace, though adorned with riches, were empty of warmth. Prince Dike remained distant, a phantom of a husband who neither shared her bed nor his thoughts. She tried everything to draw him close. She prepared his favorite meals with her own hands, only for the food to be left untouched. She waited for him in their chamber, dressed in the finest silk, but he never came before dawn. She sought him in the gardens, hoping for a simple conversation, but each time he would excuse himself and disappear. Her loneliness gnawed at her, but more than that, suspicion grew like vines around her heart. Why was her husband avoiding her? Why did no one speak of his ways? The palace servants would not meet her gaze when she asked about him. The elders in the court only exchanged glances, whispering in tongues she could not understand. Even the queen mother, who had once welcomed her with open arms, seemed hesitant to discuss her son. At first, Adana thought it was merely his nature. Perhaps he was just a man of few words, a warrior hardened by battle. But as the days stretched into long, sleepless nights, she sensed something more, something hidden, something dark. One evening, she confronted Dike. "Have I offended you?" she asked, standing in the doorway of his private chambers. Dike, who had been preparing to leave, stiffened but did not turn to face her. "No," he said simply. "Then why do you keep your distance?" she pressed, stepping closer. "I am your wife, yet you treat me like a stranger." Dike exhaled sharply. "You ask too many questions, Adana." She reached out, touching his arm. His skin was ice cold. He pulled away instantly, his breath hitching. "Go to bed, Adana," he muttered before striding past her. She watched him disappear down the hallway, her frustration turning into determination. That night, she went to his chambers, knocking gently. "Dike!" She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was grand but empty. No personal belongings, no signs of life. The bed was untouched, the fireplace cold. It was as if no one lived there at all. Adana's unease grew. She turned to the palace maids, hoping for answers. "Where does the prince go at night?" she asked one of them. The girl bowed her head. "My lady, we are not to speak of the prince's affairs." Adana frowned. "And why is that?" The girl hesitated. "Because it is not our place to question." The answer unsettled her. Why did no one speak of her husband? Why did he avoid her? What was he hiding? That night, she decided to follow him. The palace corridors stretched before her, lit only by flickering torches. Dyke moved swiftly, his steps silent as a shadow. He passed through halls she had never seen before, hidden passageways and winding staircases that twisted deep into the heart of the palace. Adana's pulse quickened as she trailed behind him, careful not to be seen. Then, suddenly, he stopped. Before him stood an enormous iron door, its surface covered in strange markings that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Adana pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. What lay beyond that door? And why did Dyke vanish into the night to find it? As she watched, her husband reached out and placed his palm against the door. It groaned open with an eerie whisper. Without hesitation, Prince Dyke stepped inside, and the door shut behind him. Adana stood frozen in the shadows, her breath shallow. She had followed him this far. Now, she had to know the truth. Adana's heart pounded as she crept closer to the massive iron door. Its strange markings shimmered faintly, as though they were alive. A cold chill wrapped around her, raising goosebumps on her skin. She hesitated, but curiosity pushed her forward. If her husband had a secret, she needed to know. Slowly, she placed her palm where Dyke had touched. Before she could step back, it slid open just enough for her to slip inside. Darkness swallowed her. She stepped cautiously, her breath shallow. The air was thick, damp, and strangely metallic. The chamber was unlike any part of the palace she had seen. The walls were carved with ancient symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Shadows flickered, moving unnaturally along the stone floor. A faint sound reached her ears, a low, ragged breath. Adana turned the corner and froze. Prince Dyke stood at the center of the room, his back to her. He was shirtless, his broad shoulders rising and falling as though he were struggling for breath. Sweat glistened on his skin, but it was not the heat that troubled him. It was something else, something unseen. Then she saw his reflection. A tall, grotesque figure loomed in the mirror before him, its eyes glowing a deep, hellish red. Its sharp fangs protruded from its lips, and long, curved claws extended from its fingers. Adana's stomach twisted in horror. The creature in the mirror was her husband. She took an unsteady step backward, but her foot brushed against loose gravel. The sound echoed in the silence. Dyke stiffened. Slowly, he turned, and their eyes met. His expression twisted in shock and something else, fear. Adana. His voice was rough, unsteady. She stumbled backward, her pulse thundering in her ears. What are you? Silence hung between them, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Dyke sighed. He closed his eyes, and as he exhaled, his features softened. His fangs retracted, his eyes faded back to their dark, familiar shade. You should not have come here, he murmured. Adana shook her head, pressing a trembling hand against her chest. You're not human. Dyke turned away, staring into the mirror again. No, he admitted. I am not. Her breath caught. Then, what are you? For a long moment, he did not answer. Then, in a voice so low it was almost a whisper, he said, I am the son of a demon. The words sent a shiver down her spine. A sudden gust of cold wind swirled through the chamber, extinguishing the dim light. The room fell into near-total darkness. And for the first time, Adana wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Adana's body trembled as darkness swallowed the chamber. The air grew thick, suffocating, as though unseen eyes watched her from every corner. She wanted to run, to flee from whatever she had just discovered. But her feet refused to move. Across the room, Dyke stood still, his face shadowed, his breathing slow and controlled. You should not have followed me, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. Adana clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay steady. And what if I hadn't? Would you have ever told me the truth? Dyke's jaw tightened. He turned to face her fully, his eyes flickering red for a brief moment before fading to black. There are things you were never meant to know. That I married a monster? She shot back, her voice sharp despite the fear curling in her stomach. Dyke flinched. For a moment, she thought she saw pain in his expression, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You think I wanted this? His voice was low, almost bitter. You think I chose to be what I am? Adana shook her head, stepping back as the eerie symbols on the walls pulsed faintly, their light growing stronger as if feeding off the tension in the air. You lied to me, she whispered. Dyke exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I did not lie. I just never told you. Because you knew I would be terrified. Silence. Adana took another step back, but her heel pressed against something wet and cold. Her heart stuttered. Slowly, she looked down. A A dark, sticky liquid pooled on the floor, leading to the corner of the room. The scent of iron and decay filled her nostrils. Blood. Her stomach turned as she followed the trail with her eyes, until she saw it. A lifeless animal carcass, twisted and torn apart, its flesh barely hanging onto its bones. The sight was horrifying, but what made her blood run cold was the deep bite marks covering its body. She looked at Dyke. His lips were slightly parted, his fangs still visible in the dim glow of the chamber. "Tell me you didn't do this," she whispered. Dyke remained silent. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Adana's breath quickened. The truth was sinking in. Her husband was not just cursed. He needed blood to survive. A shudder ran through her. "How long have you been like this?" Dyke hesitated before answering. "Since birth." Her pulse hammered in her ears. She had heard of creatures like him in old tales, men who walked among humans but fed on the living in secret. Legends whispered that such beings were cursed by the gods, bound by blood and darkness. She took another step back. She needed to get out. But before she could move, Dyke spoke again. "You don't understand, Adana," he said, his voice softer now. "I have never hurt a human. I swore never to." She didn't know if she believed him. The symbols on the walls pulsed again, casting shifting shadows around them. The whole room seemed to breathe, as though alive with unseen forces. Adana swallowed hard. "Then what is this place? Why do you come here every night?" Dyke hesitated. "This is where I fight it." "Fight what?" A bitter chuckle escaped his lips. "The part of me that wants more than just animal blood." The words sent a fresh wave of fear through her. What if one day, animal blood was not enough? A loud clang echoed through the chamber. Adana spun toward the sound, her pulse racing. Somewhere in the darkness, something shifted. The iron door had begun to close on its own, and suddenly she realized she was trapped inside with him. The iron door groaned as it slammed shut, sealing the chamber in near darkness. Adana's breath caught in her throat. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting stories. Hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments.